The soft hum of the city outside my window was a familiar lullaby, one that had sung me to sleep countless nights since Daniel left. Boston, with its bustling streets and towering buildings, was a world away from the quiet suburban life I'd once known. Now, it was home a place where Lucas and I had started over, building a life from the ashes of a broken marriage. The invitation arrived on a crisp autumn morning, slipped under my apartment door like a secret meant to be discovered. The envelope was cream colored, embossed with gold lettering that screamed elegance and wealth. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. The scent of expensive perfume clung to the paper, a ghostly reminder of the life I'd left behind. I hesitated, my fingers tracing the edges of the envelope. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to throw it away without a second thought. But curiosity got the better of me. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the card inside. The words were like a slap in the face, a cruel joke disguised as an invitation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Victoria Hartley and Alexander Whitmore. Please join us in celebrating their union. Dinner and dancing to follow. Dress code formal. RSVP by October 1st. At the bottom, in elegant cursive, was a note that made my blood boil. Single mother, waitress. It was a taunt, a reminder of my place in their world. I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong. But I wasn't surprised. Elizabeth Hartley, Daniel's mother, had always been a master of subtle insults and veiled threats. I sank onto the couch, the invitation still clutched in my hand. Lucas, sensing my distress, looked up from his homework. His eyes, so much like his father's, held a wisdom beyond his years. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. I forced a smile, tucking the invitation into my pocket. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just something from your grandmother." Lucas's expression darkened. He knew the history, the pain that came with that title. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice firm. "We don't owe them anything." I reached out, ruffling his hair. "I know, Lucas, but sometimes facing our fears is the only way to conquer them." Later that evening, I called Sarah, my best friend since college. She was the one person who understood the complexities of my past, the tangled web of emotions that came with being tied to the Hartley family. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "After everything they've done, you're actually considering going?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know it sounds crazy, but I can't let them win, Sarah. I can't let them think they've broken me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Sarah's voice softened. "You're stronger than they give you credit for, Emma. And Lucas, he's a fighter, just like his mom. But promise me you'll be careful. Elizabeth is a viper, and she won't hesitate to strike if she feels threatened." I promised, and as I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I would go to the wedding, not as the broken, discarded wife, but as a woman who had risen from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever. The days leading up to the wedding were a flurry of activity. I scoured thrift stores for a dress that would make me feel confident and beautiful, settling on a deep blue gown that hugged my curves in all the right places. Lucas, ever the trooper, agreed to wear a suit, though he grumbled about the tie being too tight. As we stood in front of the grand ballroom, the sounds of soft music and laughter spilling out into the night, I took a deep breath. This was at the moment of truth. I squeezed Lucas's hand, and together we stepped inside. The room was a sea of elegance, with chandeliers casting a warm glow over the guests. The air was filled with the scent of roses and expensive perfume, a stark contrast to the simple life Lucas and I had built. As we made our way to our table, I could feel the weight of their stares, the whispers that followed us like a shadow. And then I saw the place card with my name, the words "single mother," "waitress," mocking me from the table. A ripple of laughter moved through the room, and I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but I didn't move. I didn't reach for the chair. I just stared at the insult printed in elegant cursive, as if reducing me to a juicy me toque. Wedding was the final touch to their perfect evening. Lucas's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts. "Mom," he said, his voice small but sharp. I glanced down at him, his suit slightly too big, his tie askew. He had his father's sharp jawline, his father's calculating eyes. But unlike Daniel, my son had a heart. And right now, that heart was filling with anger. I reached out, flipping the card face down. "It's nothing," I murmured, but Lucas knew better. He always did. Across the room, Elizabeth watched, her eyes meeting mine, her smile small but razor sharp. She had orchestrated this, and she wanted me to know it. Daniel stood beside her, a whiskey glass in hand, his posture stiff. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't stopping it either. He never did. The sight of him, so cold and distant, sent a shiver down my spine. But I refused to let them see me crumble. I refused to give them the satisfaction. As I pulled out my chair and took my seat, I knew that this night was far from over. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to fight for Lucas, for myself, and for the truth that had been buried beneath a mountain of lies and deceit. The grand ballroom buzzed with a symphony of whispered conversations and clinking glasses. I sat at the table, my spine straight, eyes fixed on the elegant centerpiece. Lucas, however, was a statue of defiance, his small hands flattened on the table, chin tilted up, and eyes locked onto Daniel across the room. The tension was palpable, a silent battle of wills playing out in the opulent setting. A microphone crackled to life, and the room fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice rang out, smooth and polished. Elizabeth stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom, her silver dress shimmering under the chandeliers. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight to celebrate this beautiful union between my daughter, Victoria, and her wonderful husband, Alexander. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on me. Her smile widened, but her eyes were cold. And of course, we have a very special guest tonight. She turned to me, her voice dripping with false warmth. Emma, dear, it's so good to see you. I wasn't sure you come after all everything. A low ripple of laughter moved through the guests. Beside me, Lucas's fingers curled into the tablecloth, his knuckles white with anger. I held my spine straight, saying nothing, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Elizabeth continued, her voice saccharine. It's just so inspiring to see how you've managed on your own. It can't be easy raising a child alone. The murmurs grew louder, and I could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment in their whispers. But I didn't falter. I held my ground, my silence a shield against their cruelty. Lucas, however, had reached his breaking point. He turned, climbed onto his chair, and grabbed a water glass. Then he slammed it against the table, the sharp sound echoing through the ballroom. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Mom, Lucas's voice rang out, clear and strong. Do you think Aunt Victoria is going to tell Uncle Alexander about her baby? Or should I? The hush that fell over the room was absolute. A waiter mid-pour froze with a bottle of champagne tilted over a glass. Someone coughed, and a woman near the front gasped it. At the head table, Victoria's entire body stiffened, her grip on Alexander's arm going rigid. Alexander frowned, glancing between his wife and my son. What, he asked, his voice laced with confusion and disbelief. Victoria's eyes widened, and she forced a laugh. Tyler, honey, weddings aren't the place for jokes. But Lucas wasn't done. He blinked up at me innocently. Didn't we hear Aunt Victoria talking to Dad about it 3 days ago when we went to drop off the RSVP? Daniel shot to his feet, his voice sharp. That's enough, Lucas. The room erupted in whispers, the tension thickening like a storm cloud. Victoria's face had gone ghostly pale, and Alexander's expression darkened, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Lucas, stop it, Daniel snapped, rounding the table, his footsteps heavy against the marble floor. But Lucas didn't flinch. He reached into the pocket of his blazer and pulled out his smartphone. I even recorded it, he said, his voice steady. Do you want me to play it? Panic struck Victoria's face like lightning. Daniel lunged for Lucas's phone, but I was already moving. I grabbed Lucas's wrist, pulling him back, placing myself between him and the man who had failed us. Alexander was faster. He grabbed Victoria's wrist, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. What is he talking about? He demanded, his voice calm but dangerous. Nothing, Victoria yanked her hand away, shaking her head rapidly. Nothing, Alexander, you know how kids make things up. He's just confused. I'm not confused, Lucas's voice was steady. I know what I heard. Then, with perfect practice precision, he lifted the phone, tapped the screen, and hit play. A crackle of static, the faint rustling of fabric. Then Daniel's voice. Be careful. What if people find out you're pregnant with my child? The room exploded. A woman near the dessert table let out a muffled scream. A glass shattered somewhere behind me. The violinist who had been playing near the entrance dropped his bow. Victoria sucked in a sharp breath, her entire body going rigid, and Alexander just stood there, unmoving, staring at the woman he had just married. Elizabeth let out a strangled, half-choked sound. This is a joke, she stammered, but no one was listening. The reception hall erupted in chaos, gasps, and whispers. The scraping of chairs against polished marble filled the air as guests stood, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. I didn't move, neither did Lucas. Across the room, Victoria's face had gone paper white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Alexander was still frozen, his eyes locked onto his new wife, a single muscle ticking in his jaw, his fingers clenched at his sides. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The recording hung in the air like a gunshot, the words echoing through the room. Static crackled a breath, then Daniel's voice again, clear and unmistakable. "Be careful. What if people find out you're pregnant with my child?" The reception hall erupted again, gasp whispers, the scraping of chairs. A waiter knocked over a tray of champagne glasses, the sound of shattering crystal swallowed by the rising chaos. I didn't move, neither did Lucas. We stood there amidst the storm, our eyes locked on the unfolding drama. Daniel lunged for Lucas's phone, but I held him back, my grip tight on his wrist. Alexander finally turned to Victoria, and when he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "Caroline, tell me that was fake." Silence. Then Victoria's voice, barely a whisper. "Alexander, I can explain." But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth laid bare for all to see. And as the room spun into chaos, I knew that this was only the beginning. The storm had broken, and there was no turning back. The grand ballroom was a whirlwind of chaos as the guests struggled to process the revelation. Victoria's sobs echoed through the room, a stark contrast to the elegant music that had filled the air just moments before. Alexander stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and betrayal before turning on his heel and storming out of the room. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot, signaling the end of their farce of a marriage. Elizabeth, her composure cracking, turned her fury on me. "This is your fault," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "You and that little brat of yours, you couldn't stand to see us happy, could you?" I met her gaze, my voice steady and calm. "You did this to yourselves, Elizabeth. You spun a web of lies and deceit, and now you're caught in it." She lunged toward me, but Daniel stepped between us, his expression grim. "Mother, stop," he said, his voice firm. "This has gone far enough." Elizabeth's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're taking her side," she spat. "After everything we've done for you?" Daniel's jaw clenched, and he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not taking sides, Mother. I'm just saying it's over." With that, Lucas and I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the shattered remnants of the Hartley family behind. The night air was cool and refreshing, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. As we made our way to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew Elizabeth wouldn't let this go. She was a woman scorned, and she would stop at nothing to make me pay. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and uncertainty. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Lucas, but the shadow of Elizabeth's wrath loomed over us like a dark cloud. I knew it was only a matter of time before she struck back, and I was determined to be ready. The first blow came just days after the wedding. I arrived at the diner, the familiar scent of coffee and pancakes filling the air, only to be pulled aside by my manager, Earl. His expression was grave as he handed me a letter, the words "notice of termination" emblazoned across the top. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I had no choice. The owner, he received a call, threats of legal action if we didn't let you go." I scanned the letter, my heart sinking as I read the words. Elizabeth's influence was far-reaching, and she had used it to destroy my livelihood. I thanked Earl, gathered my things, and left the diner, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. As Lucas and I walked home from school that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I quickened my pace, my hand tightly gripping Lucas's. We turned the corner onto our street, and I saw Elizabeth standing outside our apartment building, her eyes locked onto us like a predator stalking its prey. I steeled myself, pushing past her and into the safety of our home. But as I closed the door behind us, I knew that this was far from over. Elizabeth had drawn first blood, but I was determined to fight back. That night, as Lucas slept, I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me. I scoured the internet for family lawyers, my fingers hovering over the keys as I typed out desperate pleas for help. I knew I needed to be proactive, to strike back before Elizabeth could do any more damage. The next morning, I walked into the office of Andrea Martinez, one of the top family attorneys in Boston. Her reputation was fierce, and I knew she was my best chance at fighting back against Elizabeth's machinations. "I want full custody," I said, my voice steady and determined. "And I want them legally barred from ever trying this again." Andrea leaned back in her chair, her dark eyes sharp and calculating. That's a big ask, Emma. But I like a challenge. Tell me everything. I recounted the events of the past few days, the wedding, the revelation, the threats, and the termination. Andrea listened intently, her expression unreadable as she took notes. When I finished, she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with determination. We'll need evidence, she said, witnesses, recordings, anything that can corroborate your story. Elizabeth Hartley is a formidable opponent, but she's not infallible. We'll find her weakness and we'll exploit it. Over the next few days, I gathered everything I could find: text messages, voicemails, even the recording Lucas had made at the wedding. I reached out to friends, colleagues, anyone who could testify to Elizabeth's manipulations and threats, and slowly but surely, a case began to take shape. But Elizabeth was not idle. She launched a smear campaign, spreading lies and rumors about me to anyone who would listen. She accused me of being an unfit mother, of exploiting Lucas for my own gain. She even went so far as to file a complaint with Lucas's school, accusing me of emotional abuse. The day I received the letter from the school, I felt a cold fury wash over me. This was not just an attack on me, but on my son, on our family, and I would not stand for it. I stormed into Andrea's office, the letter clutched in my hand. We need to end this, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I won't let her take my son from me. Andrea nodded, her expression grim. Then we fight fire with fire. We take this to court and we expose Elizabeth for the manipulative, vindictive woman she is. And so the battle lines were drawn. The court date was set. And as I stood in the hallowed halls of the courthouse, I knew that this was it, the final showdown between me and the woman who had tried to destroy my life. I was ready. I was determined. And I would not go down without a fight. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the opulence of the grand ballroom where this saga had begun. The air was thick with tension as I sat at the plaintiff's table, Lucas by my side, his small hand clasped in mine. Across the aisle, Elizabeth and Daniel sat with their high-priced legal team, their expressions a mix of arrogance and unease. Victoria was notably absent, her shame too great to face the consequences of her actions. The judge, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes, entered the room and the murmurs of the gallery fell silent. The hearing began, and Elizabeth's lawyer wasted no time in painting me as an unstable and vindictive woman, driven by bitterness and a desire for revenge. Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth and practiced, this is a case of a scorned woman using her child as a pawn in a twisted game of retribution. Miss Hartley has engaged in public outbursts, fabricated evidence, and exploited her own son for personal gain. We have multiple character witnesses prepared to speak to her erratic behavior. I listened, my heart pounding in my chest as he spun his web of lies, but I did not falter. I knew the truth was on my side, and I was ready to fight for it. Andrea stood, her expression confident and composed. Your Honor, we would like to enter evidence into the record. She handed the judge a flash drive, her eyes never leaving Elizabeth's. This contained surveillance footage from the Grand Harbor Hotel, showing Elizabeth Hartley attempting to bribe a witness into testifying against my client. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the footage played on the screen, revealing Elizabeth's desperate attempt to manipulate the truth. The judge's expression darkened as she watched, her gaze flicking to Elizabeth with thinly veiled disgust. But we were not done. Andrea called Lucas's teacher, Miss Thompson, to the stand. She testified to Elizabeth's attempts to manipulate her into providing false statements about my parenting, her voice steady and sure as she recounted the conversation. She asked me to report Emma as an unfit mother, Miss Thompson said, her eyes meeting mine with a reassuring warmth. I refused. Emma is one of the most dedicated and loving mothers I have ever met. The tide was turning, and Elizabeth knew it. Her composure cracked, her eyes darting nervously around the room as the weight of her actions settled upon her. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I stood, my voice steady and clear as I addressed the court. Your Honor, I have been the target of a vicious and unfounded smear campaign orchestrated by a woman who sought to destroy my life and take my son from me. But I will not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. And I will not let her win. I turned to Elizabeth, my eyes locked onto hers. You tried to break me, Elizabeth. You tried to take everything from me. But you underestimated me. You underestimated the power of a mother's love and the strength of a woman who refuses to be a victim. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation as the judge considered the evidence before her. And then, Finally, she spoke. In light of the evidence presented, I hereby grant full custody of Lucas to Emma. Furthermore, Daniel and Elizabeth Hartley are barred from any further legal attempts to interfere with this custody arrangement. Additionally, I will be reporting Elizabeth Hartley's actions to the State Bar Association for further investigation. The gallery erupted in applause as the gavel fell, sealing our victory. I turned to Lucas, pulling him into a tight embrace as tears of relief and joy streamed down my face. We had won. We had fought against the odds and we had emerged victorious. As we left the courthouse, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. We had faced the storm and come out stronger, our bond unbreakable. And as we stepped out into the sunlight, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. In the days that followed, I found a new job at a charming little cafe downtown, the owner unconcerned with the drama of my past. Lucas thrived in school, his confidence and resilience a testament to the strength he had gained from our ordeal. And as for Elizabeth, she faded into the background, her power and influence diminished by the exposure of her deceit. One evening, as Lucas and I sat on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background, I looked at him and smiled. You know, we've been through a lot, you and I said, ruffling his hair, but we made it together. He grinned up at me, his eyes shining with love and pride. We did, Mom, and we'll keep making it no matter what comes our way. And with that, I knew that we would be okay. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger, our love beacon, a beacon of light in the darkest of times. And as we looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, hand in hand, unbreakable and unstoppable.